If you've not yet put your information in for the giveaway that I'm doing, I am giving away an Orlando Cepeda autograph on a 1964 Giant card, and I'm also giving away a Nolan Ryan autograph in addition to a really cool 1984 Michael Jordan Sports Illustrated. So if you've not yet checked out the video on how to enter that, the link is going to be in the description below. Check that out. Enter. It's completely free. Just my way of thanking people for being a part of this journey with me. Now, as I continue with content about sports cards, every once in a while, I'm not just doing baseball cards. I'm big into football cards and basketball cards, vintage of each specifically, but some of the more modern stuff. And with the football playoffs going on and the Super Bowl coming up, I thought it would be cool if I took a minute to kind of go back and do a video or two on some vintage football stuff. So in this video, I really find it interesting how there are certain people, certain players that we're bigger fans of than others. There's certain iconic players that get more attention from collectors than others, even though the stats are similar. And so I've done a lot of different videos on comparing one player to another. And the feedback I've gotten is that people like those. So I figured as we enter into continuing the playoffs for football, we would do a vintage football comparison. And I think you're going to have a really hard time figuring out which players we're talking about in these comparisons. And I think you're going to be really surprised at some of the names that you see in them. A couple of them are not Hall of Famers. A couple of them are. Check this out. Tell me what you think about it. If you're into vintage football, I think you'll really like it. If you're not into vintage football, I really think vintage football has a lot of upside right now. I think that the newer collectors are really into football. And as the newer card market continues to just completely drop, they're not going to want to leave the hobby, but they're not going to want to continue to buy, Jalen Hurts cards or Trey Lance cards or some of these newer players and see just the roller coaster of prices. So I think they're going to start transitioning to some vintage stuff. So I think now's a good time to get into vintage if you're not already. Check out this video. Again, as always, I love hearing what people have to say, what they think. That's a lot of the fun for me. So leave a comment. Tell me how you think I did in these comparisons, and tell me if there's any that you were especially surprised by. Check it out. Tell me what you think. All right, again, we are going to do a side-by-side comparison of vintage football players, looking at their stats first, then comparing the value of their rookie cards. So the first comparison, player on the left had 12,120 career rush yards, 91 career rush TDs, 8 times had 1,000 or more rush yards, 7 times had 8+ TDs, and is a 4-time Super Bowl champion. On the right, we have 11,352 career rush yards, more touchdowns, 104, 5 times had 1,000 rush yards, 6 times had 8 or more TDs, but just won one Super Bowl. So pretty similar stats. The player on the left was on some better teams, won more Super Bowls, but who are they? Well, on the left, we have Franco Harris, and on the right, we have John Riggins. Now, when we look at these players, and then we look at their rookie card values, if Franco Harris rookie card in a PSA 8 recently went for $500. A John Riggins in an 8 went for $104. So I guess the question is, do we think that Franco Harris should be worth 5 times as much as John Riggins? Now, maybe we do. But 5 times seems extreme when you're looking at two players that are They're not tremendously different markets value-wise, though. A lot different. All right, so let's look at these two quarterbacks. Now, the quarterback on the right threw for 10,000 more yards and 44 more touchdowns. The player on the left had 2 more Pro Bowl appearances. The career passing rating is very, very similar. The player on the left had 1 time, was the NFL touchdown leader, but the player on the right was a league MVP. And then they both had 4 times were the passer rating leader. So again, stat-wise similar, but Roger Staubach is the player on the left and Ken Anderson is the player on the right. So when we look at the values of these rookie cards, the Roger Staubach is over $500 for a PSA 7. A Ken Anderson is $57. Now, I'm not going to say that Ken Anderson is Roger Staubach. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is stat-wise, career-wise, a really good player isn't even in the Hall of Fame, and his rookie card in a 7's about $50 compared to a guy with fewer touchdowns, a lot fewer yards, but he's worth way more. All right, how about another comparison here? So the player on the left versus the right. So player on the left has 4 Pro Bowls. Player on the right has 6. Both were the NFL touchdown leader twice. Look at the yards for the player on the right. Player on the right has, 15,000 more yards and 60 more touchdowns. Player on the left did win an MVP award. Player on the right is a 4-time NFL passing leader. And the player on the left is a 1-time first-team All-Pro. Player on the right is a 2-time passing or first-team All-Pro. So when we compare them, it looks like overwhelmingly Dan Fouts had a better career than Ken Stabler. And a lot of people go, yeah, well, that makes sense, But then you look at the value of their cards. The value of a Ken Stabler rookie card is $142.50, and the value of a Dan Fouts is $42. Now, fair that the Stabler's a couple years older, but in some of the other examples, the fact that one has been a little older hasn't really been that much of a difference. But should it be 3.5 times, not quite 3.5, 3 times more expensive? I don't know. All right, comparison number 4, some running backs again. Look at the career rushing yards, very similar. Player on the left has about 2,000 more receiving yards and about 54 more touchdowns. 2 more Pro Bowls for the player on the left. 2-time first-team All-Pro instead of 1 time. Both won 1 Super Bowl. And the player on the left was also the rushing leader for a season twice. So in several categories, they're about the same. And then in about half the categories, the player on the left is more. Marcus Allen versus Tony Dorsett. So Marcus Allen has significantly better numbers than Tony Dorsett. Now, again, they're not the same year, the rookie card. And the 83 is starting to get a little bit into the borderline junk wax era. I would say for football cards, that's not quite junk wax era yet. And 78's not quite there. But, we're talking about, what is that, 7 times as much? Is it Dorsett? Why are we 7 times more interested? Now I want to compare Dorsett to someone else. So here's another player. This player has 12,273 career yards. So similar in yards, similar in receiving yards, a little bit less in each. Touchdowns are almost exactly the same, very similar again. The player on the left 4 times had 1,250 yards rushing, 2-time Super Bowl champ. So the player on the left, very good. Ottis Anderson is the player on the left, not even in the Hall of Fame. Ottis Anderson's stats are not that different than Tony Dorsett's stats. Now, Tony Dorsett had some amazing stuff in college, and he had a couple of really amazing years, but I mean, Ottis Anderson's stats, they're not much less, but his card is less than $30 for his rookie card. Seems interesting to me. Now, again, I'm not saying Ottis Anderson is Tony Dorsett, but what I am saying is I'm surprised that we're so drawn to some players over other players. And some players have the name appeal. Playing on the Cowboys obviously is a big deal. Playing on the Steelers apparently is a big deal. And those things are dramatically changing the prices of players of similar stats. Interesting. Appreciate you watching. Leave a comment